Let's do this. The Cult of Hockey podcast by the faithful and for the faithful. I'm David Staples of the Edmonton Journal, and I'm here today with Bruce McCurdy. Hey, Bruce.
Hey, David. How you doing?
Good. Just back from my evening exercise, so that it always feels good to get out and get the blood pumping and stay healthy in an unhealthy time. What about you?
Yeah, I got out a little earlier in the day. It's with the snow on the ground. I like to get in before dusk, because you'll start losing your depth perception on that snow after a while. You don't really get a sense of the texture of it. So I like to get in and out. Of course, sunset so early anymore. It's almost 4:45 now that it's setting in standard time. So anyway, other than that,
is this the real time? Is this like
this is standard time?
This is the way it should be then?
Yes.
Oh, I think I prefer the daylight savings time. Just keep that.
Well, noon is actually centered something close to noon. You know what I mean? And like the middle of the day is around 12:30 standard time, around 1:30 daylight time. So it's just a matter of adjusting our internal clocks. I mean, the time doesn't change. It's just the way we mark it that we mess with it twice a year for whatever reason.
I don't like the dark evenings. I'd rather have light.
Oh, it's going to be dark no matter what, David. It's like we're getting into the depths of a winter here.
Isn't that the truth, Bruce? Hopefully all the good news today about the possible vaccine is true, because we could use some good news. Alrighty, let's talk about couple interesting things. I've been watching the games of three Oilers prospects. One of them's kind of old to be a prospect, but and I will try to use the Swedish pronunciations because, Bruce, we can hear it right from the horses. I'm hearing these Swedish broadcasts. So the first player is I don't know how they say his first name, but it's Theodor Lennstrom, a 26-year-old UFA that the Oilers signed this year. The other one is Philip Broberg, who we call Philip Berglund, but they call Philip Broberg. And I think he's 20. I'm just
22?
23. And he was drafted in 2016, I believe, the Puljujärvi year.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And he plays in this. These players all play in the Swedish elite division, a league. Yeah, he's 23 now. May 10th, 1997 was his birthday. And the third player that I watched was Philip Broberg, and who we call Philip Broberg. So Broberg was the Oilers' first pick in 2019, eighth overall, Bruce?
Yes.
Yeah, just ahead of Trevor Zegras. Caused a lot of controversy with that pick. Yes. So I'll tell you, I had kind of first impressions. This is the first time I've seen them. I've seen Broberg play in kind of junior all-star things. This is the first time I've seen him play against men in the Swedish Elite League. So we're going to get into that. We'll talk a little bit about the passing of the great Howie Meeker, big Canadian hero, and also about a Remembrance Day story that you're working on right now that is related to hockey, and we'll talk about that. Why don't we start with Howie Meeker, Bruce, and I'll just quickly give my thoughts on it because I know you wrote a post on it. But
I did.
And a very good post I read. I really enjoyed it. Growing up with Howie Meeker.
He was a big man in town. Anyway,
I was just recently impressed again with Howie Meeker. Might have been about a year ago, and I don't know how old the interview was, but I think it was from his 80s, early 90s. He was still playing hockey. And he just talked about how he loved hockey then more than he had ever loved it in his life, playing at that point. And he had found a team that he really felt at home on. And he was with a bunch of other guys who loved to pass the puck. And if Howie Meeker, of course, Howie being Howie, he had some choice advice, which was use a short hockey stick. Like those long hockey sticks, you can't make a pass. You got to get the short hockey stick. So, since that time, I've shortened my hockey stick, and indeed, it is very true. Way more. It's harder to poke. I'm a defenseman. It's harder to poke check someone, but it is way easier to get off a good shot or make a pass, do all those little skill things with a shorter hockey stick. So thank you, Howie Meeker. And thank you for being an inspiration, playing hockey into your 80s. That's my goal in life, is to play hockey into my 80s. And it's probably my fundamental goal at this point, or one of them. It's in the top 5. So he did it. If he did it, others can do it. So way to go, Howie Meeker.
Yeah, he was. I grew up in St. John's, Newfoundland, and Howie was the big hockey man there. Uh, After his playing career, he moved down. But first of all, I mean, what an absolutely remarkable life. Uh, he uh, he just turned 97 last week, and I was thinking of him already last week, and talked about him a little bit on Low Tide Show, on my weekly spot on the Lowdown and Low Tide, TSN 1260, every Wednesday. And his name came up, and we talked about him a little bit then. And I asked Alan, I said, next week on Remembrance Day, I want to talk a little more about Howie, because kind of, Remembrance Day kind of fits the theme of Howie. And I mean, I guess probably Remembrance Day, I will be talking to him about Howie, because in the meantime, he died. I mean, this was all set up, even, it's just based on his birthday. Well, he lived to the ripe old age of 97, and he managed to milk everything out of life. I think that's possible. I mean, what a life he had. He nearly ended very young for him. In World War II, he got blown up 2 different times by grenades. One of which caused serious leg injury that they originally said he would never walk again, and he would not only walk again but skate again, and skate well enough to make it to the National Hockey League, despite some sort of ongoing issues with that leg, as I understood it. This was, I mentioned in a few books that I read back in the day about the Leafs, who were my childhood team. Anyway, uh, he finally came into the NHL in 1946-47 after the war, and all he did was score 27 goals, including 5 in 1 game, still an NHL record for a rookie, tied only once by Don Murdoch, who later became an Edmonton Oiler. So from 1947, that record stands. Uh, and he played on a line with great Teeter Kennedy, as well as Vic Lynn, the original KLM line, Kennedy, Lynn, and Meeker. And they won the Stanley Cup in his first year. They won the Stanley Cup in his second year. They won the Stanley Cup in his third year. First team in NHL history to win 3 Stanley Cups in a row. And Meeker had his name engraved on all 3 of those cups. And then a fourth one in 1951, where Howie himself made the pass that Bill Barilko finished for what remains one of the most famous goals in the history of hockey. That won the 1951 Stanley Cup in overtime against the Canadiens. And of course, Bill Barilko, famously, that was his last game. He disappeared in a airplane incident that summer, and his body wasn't found for over 10 years. Anyway, different story, but they were they were connected as part of that great Leafs team that won 4 in 5 years. Actually, 5 in 7 years, same as the Oilers, from 45 to 51. And he ran into injuries after that, Howie. So his career was pretty short. He only played 8 years in the NHL. But later, while he was playing, he was elected as a member of Parliament. He was recruited by Conn Smythe to run for Parliament in the by-election, and he won in a major upset, age 27, serving in Parliament and playing hockey for the Leafs. So that just as a little aside. Then he went on to coach the Leafs and briefly become a general manager of the Leafs before he had a falling out with the Smythe family, and that that ended. And so he was kind of left at odds and ends in his young 30s, and he got a call saying, "Why don't you come down to St. John's, Newfoundland? Our hockey program could use a boost." And so he wound up in my hometown for almost 20 years, working in the Protestant school system at first, and then he gradually expanded. And he had hockey schools, and he was coaching teams, and had a sporting goods store. He was reading the sports scores on the evening news. Like, he was everywhere. Howie was everywhere in that town. And I wound up in one of his hockey schools myself as a wannabe young goalie. So it was kind of fun to have that sort of first person point of contact for a couple of years. Um, Not that I ever developed in anything more than a wannabe goalie, but hey, it was, if you're going to play, you might as well be coached by the best, right?
Coached
So,
by Howie Meeker personally.
and then of course after that, long story short, this is the part where most people remember, is he went on to become a quite a famous hockey analyst on CBC television, uh, uh, doing uh, video reviews with a high angle camera and a little device called a telestrator, and his own inimitable style with the infectious enthusiasm and the high squeaky voice and the back it up, stop it right there, and he'd run through the play and he'd pick out some play leading up to a goal or something that maybe happened 30 seconds before, but was, the key. He would wind through the whole play and see what really started it. Something they still don't do very well, frankly, on replays in hockey. They so much show the last part of a play, and they show it over and over and over again. And Howie would, during the intermission, give you a good clean look at maybe a 40 or 50-second sequence, and he would focus on one guy or one specific aspect, and he would just bring it into the spotlight. And he put out videos. He put out a very famous book, Howie Meeker's Hockey Basics, and he just was front and center in just so many different ways and so many different aspects of life. Like, what a phenomenal life, Howie
I
Meeker.
never understood, Bruce, why he disappeared off the TV.
He
Has that ever?
retired.
Did he decide to retire?
He decided. I was reading one of the many posts I read about him yesterday. He woke up one morning in 1998 and he said, "Why am I here? I want to be home with my wife, with Grace."
Oh, okay.
And he was like turning 75 that year, and I guess he went to probably Ralph Mellenby, and he said, "I've decided I'm done here. I'll do 10 more broadcasts, and then I'm going home." And then
Oh, there you
and
go.
then he went home to Parksville, BC, on the other coast of Canada, where he also had hockey schools galore. He's in the BC Hall of Fame. He's got an arena named after him. Same kind of story, just this tremendous outreach of teaching hockey, and he was way ahead of the curve, teaching hockey skills, skills, skills. It was those things I attended. He cut the ice in half, and there was a scrimmage in the goalie's half of the ice, and on the other half was Howie with a whistle and pylons and about 50 pucks. Like there's always pucks. Everybody had a puck on their stick while they were doing these drills, and he would rail on it for years after the Russians are getting ahead of us, because they're focusing on skills, and we're all talking about tactics. We don't need tactics. We need skills. And he wasn't wrong.
He wasn't wrong. No, he wasn't wrong, and we got the skills. We
Yep.
someone by the name of Walter Gretzky. I don't know if he was listening to Howie, but he certainly focused on skills. And between Gretzky and Meeker, there was the perfect analyst and the perfect example of hockey skill just at the right moment. I mean, there've been obviously other great skilled players,
Right.
but Gretzky's skill level, I think, took it to a whole new level. And
Just
Canada's.
that's coaching, and you're right. I wouldn't surprise me one tiny bit that in some way that Walter had been inspired by something Howie Meeker had done himself.
Yeah, I don't know if there's any mention of that, but it's in Walter's book or Wayne's. But it's certainly a possibility because they're the same era, right? Like it's this
Hmm.
exact same moment that's all going on. Well, Bruce, rest in peace, Howie Meeker.
Hmm.
Speaking of skill, I watched some Swedish hockey players, and those guys can play. Of course, they could play back in Howie's day, and we had WHA fans that we were. We had the great pleasure of watching some of the most skilled Swedish hockey players ever. Ulf Nilsson, Lars-Erik Schuberg, and Anders Hedberg, as my dad called him back in the day. That's where I first heard the
Hmm.
Swedish Y at the end
Hmm.
instead of the G. My dad one day was calling him that. I don't know where he got that from, but he must have known a Swedish person or something like that, a Swede, and heard that from them. But they were on the Winnipeg Jets, and that was with Bobby Hull, and that was the team that inspired Glenn Sather.
Yes.
That line inspired Glenn Sather to free up the Edmonton Oilers, and you can't underestimate how important that was, Bruce, in hockey history, because you could take that. I think you could take that same group of Oilers players And if you had the wrong coach, like put it up the boards, everyone stay in your lane, hard to the net, blah, blah, blah. Like all the basic hockey stuff that we're kind of the canons, the 10 commandments of Canadian hockey, which were so limiting. If say they had stuck to that, who knows what would have happened to players like Curry and Anderson and Messier probably would have been fine, or Gretzky, who even him, if with the wrong coach, or Paul Coffey. Yeah. But say they're just freed those guys up to play based on what he had seen with the Winnipeg Jets and the Swedes. And I got off on a tangent there, but
up and down your wings was a Canadian way of playing, and what the hotline brought was swirling motion. And I mean, Bobby Hull, he was still kind of up and down his wings, but the other guys would so distract with their zigs and their zags and their drop passes and their cross ice passes, and I remember making a point one time going to Coliseum in WHA to watch the Jets and the Oilers, and deliberately choosing a seat behind the net so I could look up the ice and get a sense of this east-west motion, as opposed to the north-south angle that you get from the TV camera. And I was just astonished by the breadth of their game. Like the puck was just, you had to have your head on a swivel tracking this puck when these guys were slinging it around. And
what a great team.
Crisscrossing and so on. And I mean, the Oilers, you talk about crisscrossing, that was the big part of their game, right? They had these, Messier and Anderson would always be cutting across each other's pass, and Curry was a right winger, but he seemed to score about 80% of his goals from the left wing, and the Oilers were, or at least Sather was inspired by that, and he had the guns to do it.
So the reason I'm bringing it up partly is what comes to mind is I was watching these defensemen, and one of them really reminded me of Lars-Erik Schuberry, who was this fantastic defenseman, fantastic defenseman. And it was I was watching, and the one that I was expecting to be probably least impressed with, on a certain level, maybe just because it was so unexpected, it impressed me the most, and that was Theodor Lindstrom, who is 26 years old. I think he's played like 5 years in the 3 or 4 years in the Elite League. Before that, he was in the Allsvenskan, and so the Oilers signed him. He's 26. He's 6'1", 180, I think. And he had a pretty good year last year, but I have to say, I guess maybe after the we had all been so excited, including me, over the Joel Persson signing last year, right. And Mike Zanier had come on the radio. He was Vac shows where Persson plays. He was their color commentator. He'd been really bullish on the player, and thinking he was going to be great and would make a real impact. And let's face it, Persson turned to be quite a disappointment. He just wasn't fast enough. He didn't think the game fast enough. He didn't play the game fast enough to thrive, at least. Who knows? Maybe if he had had another year in North America, he would have got it together. But so there we had another 26, 27-year-old, whatever he was, defenseman, mid-career, coming over last year. So I was kind of had low expectations of Lennstrom. But, wow, he is one smart hockey player. He was constantly making smart decisions on the ice, involving himself in the play, and really smart moves with the puck. He's very, very agile, and with a quick shift of his body, can control the puck. Another shift, evade the forechecker, and fire off a pass. And it's not a non-flashy game because he's constantly involving himself in the offense, but he doesn't rush the puck. He's not that guy. He's not a big hitter, and if there's a weakness, and there is a weakness in his game, I think he'll have trouble handling the big forwards in the NHL. Some of them, he's going to have to figure that out, to get his body in their way. He got beat down the wing by one big winger for a good grade A chance at one point in the game. So he's not a perfect player. But Bruce, in terms of a player who could help, he's a left shot D, played both sides of the ice. A player who could help the Edmonton Oilers this year. Lindstrom is a really fine hockey player, and he's right in the prime of his career. Might need a few games in the AHL, but he's a hockey player. He's got this. I could just see him combining so well with the other offensive players, with the really smart players on that team. And yeah, I was obviously impressed. It's just one game, of course, just one game. Maybe I saw him on a good night, so I'm giving him a game grade, a really high game. I'll give him an 8 for that game.
Wow.
But I don't know if he's an 8. If he's an 8,
Right.
I don't even know if he's an 8 player in the Swedish league or a 7 player or a 6 player. Like 8 is what great, a great player. He had a great game, and so he's probably a 7 player in the Swedish league, a good player. But maybe he is this great player there. I can't say for sure. I just saw him. This is my first impression, but really liked what I saw.
Excellent. That sounds exciting. He's had this is his 4th year now in the Swedish Hockey League, and he played uh, actually maybe even his 5th year. And he played in something called Sweden One, which I assume is Hockey Allsvenskan,
Yeah.
for 3 years. Like he's like Joel Persson, that he's been kicking around for a number of years, putting up pretty good numbers. This year so far, he's not playing a ton of minutes. Like he's not in the 20-minute class like I thought he might be, but he's playing like 17, 18 minutes a game. 9 games, 1 goal, 1 assist, 2 points. So not knocking it out of the park. But I did a drive-by of his recent games and just looked at some. I didn't have time to look at full games the way you did, but I looked at some of the actions within those games, like the plays where he was taking a shot on net or towards net, and very impressed with what I saw. Like I liked how he jumped up into the holes. Like he was quite aggressive without the puck. Sort of finding the soft spot on the weak side of the ice and being ready to fire when the puck got there. And he did get a goal on a play like that, as I recall, his 1 goal so far. But he's been, a 1 point every 2 games he was last year, which is very good for a D man in that league. I think offense first, like he's a puck mover and kind of
Yeah.
a proactive, aggressive attacking player.
Yeah, it's kind of hard to know where he would make the Oilers. If they wanted to have a more offensive player than Chris Russell, though, if they wanted to go in that direction, he's the guy. Like I think he could step right in on a third pairing, and
Sweet.
he's just a really smart hockey player. He's kind of fearless about his, like he'll get the puck at the blue line, pass back to the blue line, and he'll try to control it and like rather than just if it's a wobbly pass onto his backhand, and he will still try to make a move, and he'll pull it off at the blue line and get around the guy and make a play. He's just high skill, very high skill, and coming out of nowhere. I think he was undrafted, and good for him. We'll see what happens. Probably nothing. Usually nothing
Right.
happens. But I can see why the Oilers signed him, and kudos to the Oilers scout who noticed this player, because I think it was a hell of a signing, and kind of a dark horse candidate. I'm going to put him in that category to make the team, because that's exactly what he is.
Well, we had him ranked as our number 13 prospect in our summer
Yeah.
rankings, our provisional rankings. So pretty good for a first timer. That said, and technically we should have left him off the list because he's slightly too old to be eligible for the Calder Trophy, which is our usual uh,
Yeah.
definition of prospect. But he was so like August 8th, his birthday is, so he turned 26 just before the September 15th cutoff. And because we'd never covered him before, we thought let's include him in there and just treat him like a prospect for this 1 year. And he landed in a pretty good spot, but of course, sheer guesswork on our part in terms of how good he really is. I mean,
None
we're
of us
going
have
on
seen.
the information available
Yeah.
now. We're getting to the point where we can see the guy play and get a little bit more reason to at least see uh, what his qualifications might be and why it was that the Oilers signed him as you've already described.
Are they ever deep on defense, Bruce? I mean, they've got a lot of really good hockey players, so that's good because you often need a lot of really good defensemen to get through the year.
A little
Okay,
shy on
let's.
NHL experience, but they got a lot of D men that have
Yeah.
experienced hockey players for sure.
Yeah. Philip Berglund.
Mm.
He is a big right shot defenseman, 6'3", 210. So he's a big guy. And so again, this is just a first impression based on this game. He didn't have a great game. He didn't have a good game. He looked. He's got a really long reach and a long stick, and that makes up for a lot. Defensively, He's pretty hard to get around defensively. He's a good defensive player. He plays the power play and the penalty kill. He's playing like 22, 23 minutes a night. He's playing, in terms of, for a defenseman, he's got to be in the top 10 easily for the Swedish league for D-men. He's skilled enough that they use him on the power play. Bruce, he just, maybe it was because I was watching Lennstrom and Broberg, who are both really interesting offensive players in different ways. He struck me as a little bit mechanical and stiff in his movements. He can really fire that puck. He's got a good shot. He passes well. I'll just leave it at that because I don't think he had a particularly good game. I think I'll wait a little bit more before giving an overall assessment. There was enough good there that I thought, well, let's see. But he just didn't seem to be as athletic as these other two guys, and quite as moving. The skating wasn't as strong. Although he was keeping up very well in the game. So he's in Sweden this year for the full year. And then he'll probably be coming over next year. And a right shot demon. You never want to rule those guys out. So we'll see what happens.
Yeah, I again watched some selected action of his and saw a lot of him on the power play. Seemed like, and he does like to shoot the puck. Like he directs it towards the net. He, like Lindstrom, doesn't have a particularly big bomb, but he sees the holes he get both to get himself into and also to get the puck through. Shooting it through traffic and getting it into the net front area, if not on goal. And the one goal that I saw him score, he really snuck into the play and came in low on the left side where nobody would have expected. Somebody passed it over there, and he had to tap in an open side.
So of the three signings that they made recently from Europe on defense, Lennstrom, Berglund, and Niemelainen, I'm going to say Niemelainen by far, in terms of just first impressions with me, by far was the least impressive in the game that I saw. Then Berglund's in the middle and Lindstrom by far at the top. But again, these are just first impressions, and I could be wrong, and we'll see. We're going to watch these players over the next couple months closely and report back to you on their every game from here on in. So we're going to have lots more information to deal with. And in the end, we're going to revote our prospects list, which with a much more accurate,
hopefully, yeah,
at least based on our opinions, at least we'll have seen them ourselves, and we're not just not going on the opinions of others. Speaking of the opinions of others, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I looked it up. Berglund is 9th in the SHL, 22 minutes and 10 seconds a game.
Speaking of whatever I was speaking of,
sorry,
it's okay. That was good information because I brought that up. Philip Broberg, Bruce. It was the first time I've seen him play against men in the Swedish league. This is his second year there, and he is just an amazing hockey player. I think. Now, Mike. I was going to say. The opinions of others. Mike Zanier was on Oilers Now talking about Philip Broberg, and he seems a whole lot less impressed with Broberg. He was saying, I think he's going to be a 4th, 5th, or 6th defenseman. I think, and I just watched him play, and I thought, what? And there just seems to be this with this player. Like there's this group of people, and it's a large group of people, hockey people, and they think, and analytics people, and they think, this is at best a second pairing defenseman, at best, and he might not even work out into that. And then there's the other people who love this player, who just love this player, and they see possibly a number one NHL D-man, not just a top pairing guy, but possibly a player who can be a real number one defenseman in the NHL. And Bruce, I'm leaning in that camp. And so I've seen him before, highlights, and I've seen him play in the what was it? Not the Hlinka tournament, but the showcase, the World Junior Showcase, the summer showcase. Right. Again, that's an all-star game. It's in the middle of summer. So, and this is, again, a first impression. He is an amazing skater. He really is. He's first of all, he's big. He's like 6'3", 190 or 200, something like that. But he flies around the ice. He is so agile. There was a moment in the game where he was skating forward and the other team started to rush the puck. So he was skating forward at him, and then he realized I better rotate backwards. And the transition that he made from forward to backward it was a thing of beauty to see that guy move on the ice, skate like that. There's just a handful of defensemen, very, very, very good defensemen who I've seen who can skate like that. Now, is his decision making there? No, he makes still iffy decisions, and he's kind of unsure of himself, and he can get beat on defense. And like Lennstrom's decision making, for instance, he's like a player 26 in the prime of his career, just at a much different level.
Huge difference.
Hockey IQ, a huge difference in age and experience. And Lindstrom, I think, is a very, very smart player to boot. So, he's always on the right side of almost always on the right side of his man in the D zone. That isn't always the case with Broberg, but it's coming together. Like, there's been comparisons between him and Darnell Nurse, kind of big, tall guys, really fast, maybe not great passers of the puck, but good skaters with the puck. And I don't see that comparison really. I think Broberg has a much higher ceiling than Darnell Nurse ever did as a defenseman. And because I think his passing is already pretty good. I see a much better passer, and his shooting is pretty good. He gets off one-timer shots consistently. He's on the power play now and then. And they set him up for the one-timer shots. He gets that on net, gets it at the net dangerously. He comes close to scoring. There was a play where he rushed into the slot, and he got a pass in the slot, and he got just as he was getting a shot on net, someone lifted his feet from under him, and he flew through the air like Bobby Orr. Like it was just like that scene.
On the backhand, eh? I saw that play. It was very, very impressive, and he's had 2 or 3 of those.
So, just I was just, that draft pick will be controversial until it isn't. Just like Leon Draisaitl's contract was controversial until it isn't. Well, I think someone, Lecition just named it one of the top 10 contracts in the NHL.
Fourth best contract in the NHL, but it could have been better, David. It could have been better.
Well, we all, you know what? Most of us said that.
Sorry, that's a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah,
take the win. Take the win.
Yeah.
Oilers got a great player for the maximum term for a very reasonable price. Call it a win. Let's all be happy.
I think everyone's happy now with that contract. And you know what? I went back actually and read what people said on Twitter, because I did a Twitter reacts to Leon Draisaitl's comment or contract.
Right.
And the negative comments were a little less negative than I had remembered them. I had remembered somewhat I thought was pretty harsh criticism, but it was actually pretty measured. The people who were criticizing the contract, and even people who were big fans of Draisaitl, like me and you at the time, advocating, you got to sign this guy. He's going to get better. He's a center. He's going to be a great two-way center in the playoffs. All the things we were saying, and but even you and I think, would have been happier, obviously, if he'd signed for something starting with a 7, like 7.8 or 7.9. That's what I was hoping for.
It would have been 7 years starting with a 7. Would we have been as happy as 8 years starting with an 8? I'm not so sure.
Maybe
I remember writing that post that day, not the Twitter reacts, but the Oilers signed Draisaitl. The 8 that showed up in my post over and over again was 8 years. 8 years. We got him for the max. 8 years. We just got McDavid for the max. Now Draisaitl signed for the max. This is very good news. And I mean, price was edging up there for sure. But that's not something I'm going to criticize Peter Chiarelli for a lot of things. But in signing that, he said Leon's a center. He's a big guy. He's going to be an engine for our team for a lot of years, and he wasn't wrong.
Yeah, great draft pick by Craig McTavish's team that made 2 pretty good draft picks, Darnell Nurse and Leon Draisaitl, when they had that chance. 2 big pieces of this team, and Broberg. This is they've had 2 picks under the Holland regime, 2 first picks, Broberg and Dylan Holloway. And they're 2 big, really fast hockey players who play a two-way game. And, it'll be interesting to see, because Mike Zanier was saying he doesn't think the high-end offense is there for Broberg. And maybe he's right. Maybe that's going to be the case. That could well be the case. I can't say for sure, but it's hard to imagine that someone who skates like this, it's like, I guess could you say that Serge Savard never became a leading offensive hockey player in the NHL? Like he never really had. I guess he had 20 goals one year,
Well,
Serge Savard, but
he broke his leg. He broke his leg 2 years in a row. Early
yeah,
in his right
yeah,
after he won the Conn Smythe at age 21. He could sure skate then, and then he broke his leg, and then the next year he broke his leg again. And after that, he was, sort of a slow skater and still one of the great defensemen of all time, as far as I'm concerned. But he would have
wasn't he
been
a
even better without those leg injuries.
great hockey player? Well, Broberg, he's I think he's a special hockey player. I'm really glad the Oilers took him. I can see why they took him. I'm in that camp of people who see something really special in this hockey player, and I think they made the right choice. And we'll see or they made. Who knows? I haven't seen all these other players. Maybe Cole Caulfield or Zegras or who are Philip Bondi, was that one of the other guys? And there's all these American players that they.
Right. Yeah, that was the American heavy draft. Yeah.
Yeah.
What I see out of Broberg is when they play regular games, at least once a week or so, he makes some kind of highlight reel play. You described one of them just now with the play where he cut across the front of the net and got hauled down and still managed to get a very dangerous. That was a great save by the goalie. He would have
Yeah.
potted one there, and he's capable of athletic decisions while he's kind of in an awkward spot where he can still control and make his play even while he's flying through the air, going down or what have you, and he's going to thrill us periodically, I think, over the years to come.
Such an athletic player. It's just tantalizing to think of players like him and Lindstrom playing with McDavid and Draisaitl in the future. So we'll see what happens with both of them. But and I'm looking forward to again watching them play. I guess Broberg will be moving on to play for the Swedish World Junior team. Well, probably not till mid-December. I know the
Right.
Canadian team's getting together,
He'll
but
be here.
he'll be here. The Canadian team's getting together, but they're not. They have to because they're not playing games. Most of those guys, except for the guys in the queue. Bruce, you're working on a big story for Remembrance Day. I remember one day coming upon you or at St. Albert Place, and you
Service
were
place.
service place, and
Ser-
you were looking high up top, trying to decipher. I think it was a photograph. Is that what it was?
was a sweater hanging in the high on the wall of service place with a letter beside it under the logo of the Montreal Canadiens, and it was like 15 feet off the floor because it's a big high open ceiling there with 2 stories. So I had to bring my binoculars in to read the letter. Well, I've subsequently seen a better copy of that letter, but it's from the Montreal Canadiens, trying to explaining why a Montreal Canadiens sweater is hanging in Service Place in St. Albert, and it's in honor of a true hockey pioneer who I knew nothing about until I moved to St. Albert a few years ago, and on my walks, when I would go right through the middle of town, there's a pedestrian footbridge right ge- geometric center of St. Albert, right across from St. Albert Place, goes across the Sturgeon River, called the Benoit Bridge. And it's named after a guy named Joe Benoit, and the plaque there says uh, Joe Benoit, number 5, number 11 for the Montreal Canadiens. I'm going, Joe Benoit. It just doesn't mean anything to me. So I went home and I looked up his stats. And here's another player. He started his NHL career, let's start with that, in 1940. He played till 1943, and then 2 years disappeared out of the record. And it's just another one. We talked about Howie Meeker earlier, and there were many, many others, players who interrupted their playing career to join the armed forces and to fight the good fight during World War II. And in his case, he'd been a tremendous player and scorer with Montreal. He scored 30 goals in 1942-43, playing on a line with Elmer Locke and Toe Blake.
How many
Uh,
goals?
30 goals.
How old was he?
Second, he was 26 years old at that time, and he was second in the NHL in goals,
Holy moly.
1942-43. Only Doug Bentley ahead of him. And the big time line, Elmer Locke, Toe Blake. Anyway, Joe uh, uh, enlisted in the armed forces, and so Montreal had to find a new right wing, and they went out and they dug up this guy named Maurice Richard, who moved into Joe's spot and what was already called the punch line, but the punch line added even more punch. Of course, 43-44, with the league weakened by so many players out for the war, Maurice Richard came in and scored 50 goals in 50 games, one of the most famous seasons in NHL history, playing with the same line mates. So in one sense, you could say, well, Joe Benoit was the Wally Pipp of hockey. You know, Wally Pipp was the guy who felt sick one day and came out of the lineup, and the Yankees put Lou Gehrig in his place, and Lou Gehrig never missed a game for the next 15 years. But he was so much more than that. Joe Benoit was the first St. Albert native to play in the National Hockey League. He was the first Métis, near as I can tell, and I've done a fair bit of research with some help from family members and others. First Métis to play in the NHL. Now we hear lots about Willie O'Ree, and we hear lots about Fred Sasakamoose and some of the other players that were trailblazers. Uh, I never heard tell of Joe Benoit, and I never heard much tell about Métis playing in the NHL until recent years. And part of it was just a reluctance to, because they got so much negative feedback that they're a little reluctant to even make it known. Like I found an Edmonton Journal article from 1943, April of 1943, and it introduced them as black-haired Joe Benoit, a French Canadian from St. Albert, but it doesn't say anything about the Métis aspect. Anyway, I think he was the first one in the NHL. He was also one of the very first, and I think possibly the first, I haven't quite been able to verify this, player to win both the World Championships and the Stanley Cup. Because he was a member of the Trail Smoke Eaters that won the World Championship in 1939, just on the cusp of World War II. In fact, it was the last World Championship that was played for 10 years, but he was a big time scorer on the Trail Smoke Eaters in 39. He copped that well, first of all, the Allen Cup. Of course, that's how they qualified for the to go to the World Championships, and then they won the World Championship. Then he played for the Habs, and he came back after the war was over. I mean, he missed 2 years in the NHL, and he played again for the Habs in 45, 46. Of course, his job on the punchline was bought and paid for by the Rocket. So he played a little deeper down the lineup, but he had a pretty decent season. And but he didn't play in the playoffs. But the Habs did win the Stanley Cup, and he did get his name on the Stanley Cup, recognized as Stanley Cup winner. And he got hurt. He got hit by a famously dirty player called Black Jack Stewart, and suffered a back injury, and that basically put the end to his playing career. He missed the playoffs that year. The next year he played like 6 games and they no points and they sent him down. Like he just was never the same after that. And he wound up going on to coach in the Western Hockey League in Seattle. Lived out his life in Seattle. Died at age 65, but he set a lot of firsts along the way, and he did it from persistence. I mean, 1936 when he started playing for the Edmonton Athletic Club, nowadays known as the South Side Athletic Club, and he would hitchhike or walk from St. Albert to the south side of Edmonton for practice. Imagine doing that every day, or however often as they did it. But he wanted it bad, and he became a very good player and high end scorer at the top levels of hockey, both amateur and professional game.
So he didn't play at all in 43, 44.
Not at all in 43, 44, and then 44, 45. He played a few games with the Army team based out of Calgary. So
Yeah.
there was they used to have some of the hockey stars. They would have them tour around. My dad, who also served in World War II, same years, 43 to 45, when he was doing basic training in Toronto in 42, 43. uh, he said that he saw an exhibition game where some team came through, and there was a couple of NHLers that was on this team. And part of it was just sort of to motivate and entertain the troops. So uh, that's what he did in 44, 45, or at least for part of that year. But
Max Bentley. Max Bentley was on that team. It says here. I'm just looking at their lineup.
mhm. Oh
Max
yeah,
Bentley. I don't recognize any of the other names.
yeah. Well, there was many great great hockey players who took that time out to do their duty, and some never came back, or some came back and weren't able to resume their careers, or so it was it was quite a time. And I know my dad, he always had huge admiration for those sports stars, especially hockey and baseball, which were the two sports that he followed, who left their relatively lucrative careers behind to follow a higher calling, and so it turns out this week with Howie Meeker passing away when he did, and the Joe Benoit story that I've been working on for some time, that's the one thing they have in common is they both took time away from their hockey careers to to join the armed forces and get involved in the war effort against the Nazis.
I guess they would have played together or against each other
Oh,
in the NHL, right?
well, Howie was a rookie in 46, 47, and that's just when Joe was
Played
at the
six
end of the line
games.
and played
Yeah,
just 6 games. So they may have played a game against each other. The odds are they played one or two,
yeah, that might be
but
it. Yeah,
Joe was hurt by then and trying to play through this back issue that he just couldn't. But I just thought, who is this guy and how is this such a secret? So anyway, the more I dug into it, the more I thought, yeah, I want to write a post about this guy, and I want to write it on Remembrance Day because of that connection. So that's what's coming up on Wednesday at the Cult of Hockey.
well, great work, Bruce. That's a really good
Mm.
story. Fascinating
Yeah,
story.
super interesting. Yeah. I really was fascinated. I learned a lot. I learned a bunch about the Métis culture and some of the backstory there as well in the process. So huge Métis community here in St. Albert because of course it's the intermingling of the French and Indigenous peoples, and this is a French Canadian town, Saint Albert, and that's the patron saint of Albert Lacombe, who was the guy who started St. Albert way back in 1861. There's a very rich history in this town.
So this coming week, Bruce, we're going to continue to watch some prospects, and there's a number of games coming up. The players are playing over in Europe, and we'll be grading those games. We'll be doing our Cult of Hockey game grades.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah, I look forward to watching some living people, playing hockey and scoring goals. I mean, this history stuff is great. I love it, but also want to get back into the here and now and the future as we've been doing on that series.
it's fun to watch the games. It's I've been raving about a couple players today, and I was really impressed with Ryan McLeod. It is, of course, these are lesser leagues, and more than that, I think this is a bigger ice surface, and it really like for a player like McLeod, like a player like McLeod, he just there's just all this room for him to go, and I think I might get a better impression of him and maybe Broberg as well based on that. Just the space of the game, the wide open spaces of the European game. So that's something I'll have to keep in mind. And as you're listening to us, I guess rate these players. Keep that in mind that we're rating them. They're playing a different style of hockey. For one main difference is the whole idea of having left shot and right shot defensemen on their strong sides, on their own sides, which is dominates in the NHL. In Europe, they're switching up all the time. It's constant. Like through the game, they'll switch sides, and they're often playing on their like Broberg was playing on he's a left shot. He was playing on the right side and constantly switching. So it's not uncommon there. So anyway, we'll watch these guys. They're going to be back in action. A lot of them tomorrow, and through the week, all the Oilers prospects. The only ones we can't watch are the ones in the lower Swiss and we can't watch Benson, Marody, or Rodrigue, because their games aren't they're not in the package that we're watching these games on, so we'll miss out on those guys. But everyone else, Bruce, we shall see. And Dominic Cahoon, the German schedule isn't out yet, but they're supposed to start on the 14th of November. Yet, so we'll see if that happens, and we'll watch. I'm looking forward to seeing Dominic Cahoon.
Yeah, me too.
As well.
Yeah. The thing to bear in mind, of course, is that at this point, is we're grading them on the basis of individual games, right? Like you said, you caught Lindstrom on a good game, and you caught McLeod on a good game, and you caught Berglund on a not good game. And of course, as we start returning to these guys and seeing them 2 and 3 and 5 times, that we'll get an idea of their consistency. How do they maintain that level, or are they up and down like a lot of players? And if they're up and down, well, if you pick one game, you could get anything, right? So.
For sure, and so that's the proviso. That's why we're going to watch them over time, and I'm really looking forward to it. It's going to be fun. Well, Bruce, let's leave it there. Thanks for talking tonight.
All right, thanks for listening, everyone.
And in the meantime, and in between times, this has been another edition of the Cult of Hockey podcast.